welcome. Thank you for sticking around. I see a couple friendly faces out there, which is great. We're excited to have this panel today. There's a lot of exciting things you've been hearing about throughout the day that are happening in Utah. Workforce, I know we've talked quite a bit about that. And obviously there's some incredible things that our entrepreneurial ecosystem is adding. But we wanted to talk a little bit today about some of the things that the state is leaning in terms of helping to create the right infrastructure, the right ecosystem to support all these incredible things that are happening in the state. So we're going to be talking about that today. I'm going to actually let each of our group here introduce themselves, and then we'll jump into the content.
All right, my name is Ben Hart. I'm the Executive Director of the Utah Inland Port Authority. We're a statewide entity that has specific geographic responsibility and some really cool financial tools. So we'll get into that and our mission a little bit more throughout the program.
Hello, my name is Michael Ambre. I'm the Executive Director over Point of the Mountain State Land Authority.
Patrick Gilligan with Lincoln Property Company. I'm the regional partner that oversees Pacific Northwest and Mountain West, and we're the lead developer at the Point.
Jerry Henley. I'm the managing directors at the Utah Innovation Fund, also with Jeff Moss and Gabby. And I also am helping to build out the Convergence Hall at the Point of the Mountain.
All right, well, we're excited to have y'all here. We're going to just jump in. I think we'll just maybe start from left to right since you're sitting next to me here, Ben, if that's okay. Tell us a little bit more about the Inland Port. I know you have a slide deck. I think we're at the end of the day. That might be helpful. You know, some visuals to help out. So if you want to show that, or just tell us about what it is, what are we doing there? I mean, there's a lot of questions around what is this Inland Port thing we've heard about. Some people don't really know exactly what you're doing. But then also about how does that tie into what we're doing with the life sciences?
Absolutely. So let me first say, I'm not going to go through my entire slide deck. I'll just hold this slide up for a second, just to give some illustrative to my content and what I'm saying. Let me just first say, why does the state of Utah care? Why should we care about life sciences? For those who may be from outside of the state, you can recognize very quickly that this industry means something to us here in the state of Utah. Not all industries are created equal, and we're talking about the industries that pull the rest of the economic engine. Biosciences, life sciences are absolutely probably the most important engine that helps to pull the rest of the economy along. We have a few of those industries here in the state of Utah, but ultimately, we view this industry as absolutely critical to overall economic success. So that being the case, what we often see though, and this comes from a lot of years working in economic development, we see tech companies, aerospace and defense, other industries where there's almost that corporate culture where they come in and say, look, what are the incentives available to us? Biosciences, life sciences doesn't do that. I mean, they come in and they just say, look, we need to put our roots down. We're going to find the best place to do that, and ultimately we're going to build. I see a lot of life science companies, particularly here in the state of Utah, that leave resources on the table. And it's really important to understand and know and recognize that all these resources are not only available to you, but you probably have preferential treatment for a lot of them, quite frankly. And so knowing and understanding these resources are critical. I'll say this, if you're going to spend capital and you're going to hire people, come talk to the state of Utah. Those are the two key indicators. So when we look at this from our perspective as the port, we have probably the most critical area is this one here, the northwest quadrant of Salt Lake City. It's the 16,000 acres around the Salt Lake City International Airport. We have the underlying tax base, access to that tax base so that we can help provide incentives, infrastructure, all sorts of things that are needed to facilitate your development. Right now we have Biomary U in this area. We have other areas that are just located right adjacent to it like BD, a number of others, Varix, others that are in this area. There are opportunities for you to come in, visit with us, and ultimately you might be able to qualify for a lot of different incentives. We feel like, again, because you're such an important part of this economic engine here in the state of Utah, we're willing to provide those incentives, typically at a higher rate than what we would for other industries. The other part of this, and the other part of our mission, is how do we provide you a better logistics system for your industry in specific. We have found that a lot of life science companies are trucking things in, even internationally. They're having to put things in on trucks. A lot of air cargo that will come into LAX or to SFO or Denver, even Miami and then trucked into the state of Utah. So the other part of the port, we're meeting with a lot of life sciences companies to understand what their shipping needs are. We're finding a lot of need for cold storage in the market. We're finding better, or hearing about better air cargo access, and even better truck interface with road and rail. And so we're going to be making a lot of investments, targeting a lot of these investments specifically for life science companies to make sure that you've got the right facilities logistically to be able to get your goods in and out of the state of Utah. So there's a lot of things happening. This industry is very important to us here in the state of Utah, and there's a lot of things that we can do to help. Ultimately, it's just how do we interface and find the right places.
Well, and thank you for, again, for those that don't know, Ben previously worked in the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, and so he brings a wealth of knowledge in terms of what we're doing as a state in that area. So thank you for that, and we'll come back a little more on the specifics of that. But Patrick, we're going to shift to you. We talk about the point a lot as this once-in-a-generational opportunity, that there's something we can do here that the state can be proud of, 30, 40 years from now. Tell us a little bit more about what the point is, where you're at in the process, and how does that apply to the folks here in the life sciences community?
Yeah, no, thanks, Jefferson. So, I think when it comes down to sort of the point, right, where we looked at it and what really got us interested to sort of put our hat in the ring in the process years ago is it's just a phenomenal location, right? It's a dead center, sort of bullseye of the two major population centers in the state of Utah. And really been just sort of underappreciated land for a long time with the former use that was there. So great visibility, great access, great location, all the things you want to sort of check the box for just good commercial real estate. Biggest challenge, right, is big. It's 600 acres. The first phase, which we've been selected to complete, is about 100 of that, which is about 66 net developable, which means there'll be buildings on that 66 acres of that project. I think what's great is you have a blank canvas, right? And that's very rare to have really in any market of scale, especially in a mature market such as between Salt Lake City and Utah County. So it's a tremendous opportunity. It's also one you really got to get right off the get-go. So we've spent just an immense amount of time really focusing on kind of building sort of the backbone of what is going to support this hopefully great ecosystem that will get developed over the years. And this first phase really is, dedicated to a very meaningful urban experience, really looking at the right density, making something that's approachable. Really, we spent a ton of time going to some of our favorite projects across the country and really around the world and looked at what the best practices were there and what made successful placemaking. And that's obviously, our main street, which we call the Promenade, which you've seen a lot of material. If you went to our little booth, you probably looked at some of that. But that's sort of, we're building the center of the project first, which is kind of rare. Usually you'd sort of build along the freeway frontage or what's most accessible. We said that's not going to work here. We want this we need sort of a heartbeat for the project. So spent a ton of time focusing on this Main Street concept, where if you've been to some projects around the country of Santana Row in San Jose, Legacy West in Plano, Texas, like some just really good Main Street new developments that have really been extremely successful. And then it's a mix of uses that you bring around there. You really don't want to, the old days of zoning, like in a lot of cities, okay, here's your office buildings, here's your multifamily buildings, they're all in their own little districts. Like we're sort of throwing it out the window because really good projects have those mixes really well intertwined. And for the life science community in Lincoln, this is a backup to that. I mean, we've got about $1 billion of life science projects, both CGMP and research, under development across the country. We have a portfolio of about 10 million square feet of projects in all the major life science markets, whether it's San Francisco, Mission Bay, Seattle, South Lake Union, East Lake, and Back Bay, Boston. So, what we have found in the life science community, I'm sure a lot of you can attest to it better than I can, is that everybody wants to they want their cluster, right? All the life science buildings typically want to be somewhat close to each other, but they don't want to be directly adjacent to each other. And so we have this great ability at the point to really kind of place these buildings throughout the neighborhood that will help, I think, just again, kind of create those special synergies. And so we're really excited about the opportunities that are there to really kind of, live, do research, have an office space in a truly vibrant mixed-use community that's walkable and with something that's going on, 24 hours a day, hopefully. So I don't know if that answered it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And Jerry, we're going to go to you now. So Jerry has, I don't know, 20 plus years experience in this industry at least, right? In terms of your maybe you can speak a little to that. But one of the things that this project from the beginning was always meant to do was to create this innovation hub, a place to bring people together to help encourage future innovation. Can you talk a little bit about what is happening with Convergence Hall, what the purpose of that is, and how that's going to help support this industry?
Sure. As Patrick mentioned, right in that center part is going to be the Hart, and within the center of that is actually Convergence Hall. The hall is going to be approximately 200 to 250,000 square feet that will house between 500, 700 startup companies within the state of Utah. But those startups companies will also collaborate with other universities throughout the entire nation. We've already had universities contacting us, want to make sure that they're part of it. This should be, and we're hoping that it will be, the #1 innovation center within the whole United States, where everybody will come. We've even had foreign countries, France, Spain, Portugal, Mexico, that also want to be a part of this. Right now, we're building this so that it's within the state of Utah. We'll use this, especially with the universities. Right now, we work with all 16 universities, higher education universities within the state of Utah, to be able to help them do collaboration and also to be able to do their commercialization. We're going to have housing within this Convergence Hall, the apartments that they will be able to live and collaborate together within that, which helps them to stay where they're at, do what they're wanting to do within that group. We'll have areas where they can collaborate together, but also areas where they will have their own company within those walls. And so this will be probably the premier innovation center anywhere. Jeff and I have looked at so many places, and this is, we're trying to model everything to the best of every innovation center, and we don't think there will be an innovation center in the United States, maybe in the world, that will be able to match what we're doing here.
Okay, thank you. Mike, why don't you give us maybe an update? You've been on the job for how long in this role?
2 weeks so far.
2 weeks on the job. Now, he has been very involved in the project for a while in his previous role. But can you give us an update? Is there talking about this wonderful thing that's coming? Where are we at in the process of that? Where, in terms of infrastructure, what's the plan in terms of starting to break ground?
Sure. Let me start by saying this. Let's go backwards to the Point's legislative initiatives, right, for the Point, which is create an innovative district, have sustainable, lofty goals, have enhanced mobility, quality of life, great paying jobs. When you put all that together, the DNA of the Point really is focused on an industry just like life science. So anyway, with having said that, I know that the site's been cleared for about a year and everybody's chomping at the bit to say, what's going on? And let me tell you what's going on. We have bid out our first bid package for Porter Rockwell Boulevard, which will connect 6 West to 146 South. We're going to have a groundbreaking ceremony for that on December 17th. You will see activity starting in the next month. We also have kind of the balance of the utilities and roads bidding in December. So hopefully we'll start seeing more and more activity. And when that bids and gets bought out, it sort of triggers our partner over here to start putting in some of their infrastructure to go vertical. So everything is starting to come together, and we will start seeing this being developed over the next couple of years.
Thank you. And I want to play a little bit on this with the two of you, because you're both the directors of these projects, so you have a lot of responsibility. Ben, maybe you can talk about this. How do you see these being supporting each other to really drive what we hope to be, a world-class state when it comes to life sciences?
Well, I think the thing that's going to separate us from a lot of other places around the world, we've got great biotech hubs around the country. What's really going to separate us is the opportunity to bring both, I think, corporate office, innovation, which I think a lot of which is going to be happening at the port, at the point, and then also biotech manufacturing, which we want to attract more of at the port. We feel like there's a lot of complementary aspects of these two different developments. And so we talked a little bit about the point, just with regards to the port, what we're doing. So again, I talked a little bit earlier about enhanced incentives. And some of the other logistics items we're going to be making investments into. But for us as well, we've got a lot of developers that are already underway. We've got the ability to be able to move quickly. We've got a lot of good people that are in the biotech manufacturing space already here as well. So we feel like what we're doing is going to be very, very complementary. We feel like being right adjacent to the airport has given us a nice advantage with manufacturing as well. But look, when we saw different political and global dynamics start to shift in 2016, we saw them shift again a little bit with 2020 and the pandemic, I think in a way that significantly helps the industrial base in the United States. We expect that to stay strong for the foreseeable future. That means we're going to have more of a chance to build a true biosciences, bio-life supply chain here in the United States, and we want to capture as much as we can for the state of Utah. When we're talking about supply chain, not only manufacturing, but completely through the corporation, we realize we have to have a lot of different real estate development products. It can't just be all about, hey, we're investing in office. We have to have places adjacent that can accommodate industrial base. And quite frankly, I think where we're going to stand out from a state standpoint for the foreseeable future is probably in manufacturing and industrial, because I do think we're going to see more and more of this coming back to the United States, again, over the foreseeable future. I think the tariffs conversation that we've heard so much about over the last week and a half, I think the other supply chain dynamics that we're hearing more and more about. I just got back yesterday from a conference in Miami where a lot of these things were in discussion. Some of it is TBD, but if the track record, which we've seen over the last 8 years, proves to be true, then we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build out the best supply chain in biotech and bio manufacturing and life sciences in general across, probably globally. We've got to lean in right now. We have to have the best product stand up and make sure that we're bringing as much of this business to the state of Utah as is possible, because it's going to be coming back to the United States. The question is, can we bring a lot of that here to the state of Utah? And we absolutely believe, working together, complementary, we can.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Mike, as well, in terms of how we can coordinate and work together on that?
Yeah, and I would even loop in Convergence Hall to this conversation, because you have students that are innovating and creating, and there's corporate partners right next door. And then if they can bring that to industry and then take it to a manufacturing, so yeah, it's very much synergetic, right?
I would totally agree with that. I was just in San Francisco last week at a bio conference, and so many of them would love to move to Utah for numerous reasons. And I think we're creating these reasons here. A lot of them have already been created because of our economic landscape, and a lot of that's been created by the political government here to make it very, very profitable for companies to be in Utah, or maybe less than unprofitable to be in places like California. And we're trying to build it so that we really do have an infrastructure, but also part of what we're doing at Convergence Hall, as Mike said, we're actually bringing in partners that will bring additional value add to every one of the incubated companies within Convergence Hall. That's from banking, lawyers, accounting services that are actually just given to these companies as they're being incubated. So exactly right. I love the idea of, and then to be able to transport things there, but we don't want companies being formed in Utah and then go to somewhere else. And that's why we're building what we're building.
Patrick, your footprint's pretty big. Lincoln Properties has a lot of other things that they're doing around the country. What are some of the things that you're thinking when you see this, what's happening in Utah, seeing the ecosystem here, but especially with what we're doing at the point? How do you see that in terms of some of our competitive advantages?
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason we decided to, really lean into Utah, we've never had a presence here until really the point brought us to Utah. Now we've got a team and multiple assets. This is obviously our biggest project, really biggest project anywhere in the country. And a lot of that was just, the fantastic data that's out there about Utah, right? We're just pro-business, right? Great tax environment, well-educated workforce, all those things that are just ideal. And for a while, when you've had the bigger coastal markets, kind of sucked a lot of the oxygen away from those stats because there was just such an economic freight train there. Well, COVID, everything else over the last 4 years has really allowed people to kind of now question, do I really need to be in San Francisco? Do I really need to be in Mission Bay or Back Bay, Boston, or wherever? And where do I want to go, start a company and really, the sort of critical mass effect isn't as prevalent as it was in the past. There's much less stickiness around these industry clusters. So I think there's an amazing moment in time, and especially with this project, to really take advantage of that dislocation that's in the market and really help drive, new businesses and existing businesses to grow and thrive in Utah. So we're, very excited about that proposition. I think there's a huge opportunity ahead. And that was really the reason we really pursued the point, because we're like, hey, this is how you do it. You're going to build something so unique that really hasn't been done recently anywhere in the country. And that's a big burden, right, on everyone's shoulders to execute on. But you've got this amazing landscape. You've got a state that's really willing to do the work. If we had tried to do this, and don't get me wrong, this is a heavy lift, right? This was years of negotiations and long meetings and everything to get through a development agreement to kind of put this into a sort of movement position. But if we had tried to do that in California, it would have taken us 20 years. It just wouldn't have been able to happen. And so I think just that entrepreneurial spirit and that drive and energy you have in Utah is something that's so special and you can't really find anywhere else, especially in the West. So I think it's just a matter of, continuing to lean into those dynamics, and projects like this will help recruit those businesses to come here 100%. Because that's what they want, right? That's what they've been living in these other markets. They've had these sort of urban infill environments that have been really successful, and now there's an opportunity to have that in Utah, and I think that's just going to hopefully be the rocket ship we all want it to be.
Thank you. Jerry, we're going to hit on we've talked a lot about infrastructure, great facilities. I want to talk a little bit about the Utah Innovation Fund. So you're a partner in that, as you mentioned. How is that? Maybe just give a little bit of background for people that don't know what that is, what the fund does. But then how is that potentially going to help with both of these projects in terms of driving new innovation?
We have a $30 million innovation fund that has been set aside by the government that is run, even though it is still under USHE, it is run pretty independent. And I will tell you, in the med tech world, the bio world, we've made 8 of 12 investments. Of our total 12 investments in the last year, it's about $250,000 per investment have been made in this space. We're very, very excited, very, very bullish. The nice part about it as well is we actually are in touch with every one of the universities. We're trying to get every university to bubble up every type of startup that they have within the university, and then we're actually set up as a commercialization office for every one of the universities for those companies that want to come out. And so we have an opportunity to see them. Even if we don't invest in them, we want to make sure that we're starting to introduce them to people that could help them move that business forward, so that we either might invest in them in the future or that they might just make it on their own. And so our fund is an evergreen fund. It's run a little bit different than a regular VC fund. The managing directors, I would say sadly, but that's because I'm a managing director, get no carry and no management fee. We're doing this for the right thing for the state of Utah, as well as these companies. And so we've vetted almost 100 companies in the last year and invested in 12. And we've got a pretty deep pipeline of companies coming up. Now, these are also companies that we expect to be in Convergence Hall when it's built out, and so that they can flourish in there, and then be able to collaborate with other universities, other companies, and then to be able to use all of our partners within that, like the Microsoft, the Googles, the NVIDIAs, the law firms that can provide services to them that they don't pay for those things, plus they also get guidance and counseling from those companies of how to do it right, and so they're not making as many mistakes.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I was actually just going to say that. We'd like to get to a point. Is there anything else that I haven't covered that we want to go to, or we can turn it over and start doing some questions from the audience? Anything else you wanted to cover? I'll go down the list here if there's any final thoughts before we open it up.
I will just say we meet so often with this team. And the expertise that's in here, there still is a big heavy lift just because of everything. You think about a 600-acre parcel, even this initial part of it, it's just such a heavy lift of working with so many different groups. But the professionalism in this matches anything that I've ever been part of. And I spent 20 years with Amgen Biotech, Sorensen Capital, and I just, again, applaud this group. And I'm not a board member, I'm more of an observing person of it, but it is amazing the amount of time that's been spent to make sure that this is done right.
Okay, thank you. And we did have a question, so yeah. I think this is what keeps Mike up at night, so I'm going to turn it over to him to answer that question.
Well, as we've mentioned, this project, 600 acres, has been divided up into 100-acre increments, so it's 6 phases, right? There's certain triggers that start the next phase. The first trigger is the first phase has to be 50% completed before we start phase 2. Now, that doesn't mean we can't start other projects outside of phase 1. We call those sub-campus projects. But our main goal right now is to get this off the ground and moving forward. Because if you've ever been on kind of a large mega project, you can get overwhelmed if you kind of look at the whole elephant, right? You just have to look what's in front of you, how do we move this thing forward? And that's exactly what we're doing with the first 100 acres.
And Patrick, your firm has invested a lot of money into this project, so I know you're very incentivized to do that. But do you have any thoughts about how do we make sure that we do this the right way and we get this project going?
Yeah, and you know, like Mike was saying, you sort of have to look at it in these chunks. And the way we worked with POMSLA and the various other stakeholders on sort of crafting this DDA was to consider all those factors that we can't control, right? We can't control economic cycles. We're in one right now, obviously, from a commercial real estate standpoint, which is extremely challenging, maybe the most challenging in a long time. But being mindful of, you know, making sure that we have enough ways that we can adjust and pivot, and the land use sort of zoning, if you will, is set up so that it can be extremely flexible. That was a goal a mutual goal for all of us from day one, is like, we have to be able to adapt and pivot, right? Because if you're looking at this on a 20-year lens, what we know about commercial real estate today is going to be totally different in 20 years. I mean, that's probably a given. So whether it's a sub-campus, you know, application process, there's all different ways that if things come along, we can adjust, we can adapt, we can expand, we can, you know, a lot of different maneuvers that was all very well contemplated through our negotiations, and I think will allow us to future-proof this project as much as possible, you know, given again that we're in a built environment and it's relatively inelastic from that standpoint. But we'll have a lot of different ways that we can attack the project from wherever the market takes us, wherever Utah decides to take us.
Can I follow up a little bit? So we have taken consideration all 600 acres when it comes to the infrastructure, right? We've sized it with the densities that we're projecting, the mixed use that we're projecting. So we have looked at this and planned for the full development, and that's why it has taken 3 years, right? It's taken 3 years because, as Patrick said, things have changed over that 3 years, because when you're looking at light rail, front runner, other autonomous vehicle circulators. I mean, there's all flying, you know, advanced air mobility. I mean, you're looking at everything that we don't know about. And so, but we've built that into the infrastructure.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, or is there a follow-up? Great. Well, we'd love any other questions. Yeah, Calvin. Thank you for that very good question. And I actually will let Ben talk to that, because he gets to sit through the lens of former GOEO. How do these align? And then maybe even talking a little bit about some discussions we've had recently about how we can be more mutually working together as we go out and talk to industry.
Yeah, well, look, as we look at manufacturing and what it's going to be doing for the foreseeable future, we talk about office space, and I think Patrick kind of alluded to some of the economic cycles that we're in there. With manufacturing, it's a very, very different space. We saw a little bit of a lull. I think there was a little bit of uncertainty in the market about 3 weeks ago or so. We really saw the dam break a little bit. We started seeing a lot of projects that had been sitting on the sidelines all of a sudden come off the sidelines and show interest in development sooner rather than later. So the industrial base in the United States, is really on the upswing right now. I know there have been some that have said it has been over the past several years, but I think we're going to see pretty significant growth. That's super positive. As we look at the synergy between manufacturing and industrial activity, what we're aiming for at the port, we see that as directly synergistic to what's happening at the point. The innovation base is going to drive a lot of what happens, and I think Jerry said this really well. We can't lose Utah companies. We really have to do whatever we can to keep them here. That means a lot of different type of real estate product has to be available for them. And so the other thing that I would say is we've brought different groups into town that are certainly interested in the point. Having locations right next to the airport for a manufacturing base becomes so attractive. But thankfully, we get the opportunity to compete against places like California, where we're seeing mass exodus from California. No one wants to be in California. Our greatest pitch when we go even into New York is, look, what are you paying? And when we talk about the discrepancy in labor force, utilities, everything else, even real estate, certainly, it's so much cheaper to do business in the state of Utah. I think if everybody who had need of what the state of Utah has to offer suddenly became aware of us, we would see way over demand for what we actually have availability for here in the state of Utah. So our strongest asset, our strongest resource, our strongest trait in the state has been that we're willing to work together. If that ever fades away, we're not going to be as economically strong as what we could be. So the collaboration between the point and the port is absolutely critical. The more we work together, the better we're going to be able to attract projects to the state that will really help us moving forward.
And maybe Patrick, you had something, but maybe Ben, even if you just touch on some of the recent conversations we've had of how, even as and I can speak a little bit on this, but as we're looking at some of the same companies from different angles, recognizing, well, we really need to be a little more aligned. Can you maybe speak to that about what we're thinking in terms of how working with the governor's office to really align that message?
Yes, and any second, my chair is going to fall over backwards, so please put your cameras down if that happens. These chairs are just a little bit wobbly. I feel like I'm going to go back over. Anyway.
That would be a good way to end it, right? Would that be the way to end it?
I'm center of gravity forward. I don't know if anyone's noticed that. I'm not a huncher. I'm actually just trying to avoid an embarrassing moment. But no, so I think what we're talking about with alignment, so working, I think, together with the higher education system, we've started convening together a group to make sure that we're not missing anything. And I promise you something, we have been missing things. There have been opportunities, both here in the United States and abroad, to bring these companies that we all want, to bring these investors, to bring the creators to the state of Utah. So we see that coordinated effort is absolutely critical. So we're going to be working more closely with the point, with the governor's office, to create a more synergistic effort. Our organization, under the guidance of our board, can help to fund some of these things. So we see that as absolutely critical. I'll just share this anecdotally, but I went over to a conference in Italy a couple of years ago when I was still with the governor's office. We had no problem setting up appointments. Everyone wanted to meet with us. And all of the projects, all the people that we met with turned into active projects looking at the state of Utah. This really is a you must be present to win kind of a game. If we're not in front of the right investors, if we're not in front of the right companies, if we're not in front of the right in the right places, we're going to lose out on these opportunities. So the more we're working together on this alignment, we feel like the more we can design, target, be deliberate about where we want to grow.
Yeah, so to add to that too, I'm sorry, it was loud. If you think about just the unique aspect that you have this sort of major public-private industrial site with the inland port, and then you have this amazing public-private mixed-use, best-in-class development at the point. If you look at sort of a good analogy would be, if you look at the San Francisco life science market, right? Most of your research buildings are up in Mission Bay, South City, and then all your CGMP manufacturing is like way down in Fremont, Milpitas, Gilroy, right? And that's, on a bad traffic day, that's 3 hours in a car, right? And here you're able to do this, 20 minutes. That's pretty special to be able to have that sort of value proposition to tenants. And the fact that you also have public entities behind you there that can be an advocate and support that sort of systemic benefit for all parties, like that's really unique. And I don't think that exists anywhere. So like Ben was saying, we have to take advantage of it because I think that's a really, really compelling opportunity and great value proposition for both future tenants and existing ones.
So would it be fair to think of it in terms of the point being a great point for companies to early stage R&D, I won't go as far as the incubator necessarily, but the early stage companies, and once they start to graduate to a manufacturing level, that's when the point becomes an option. So they're really synergistic in that regard.
Yeah, and we're looking, so currently our main levers to pull are incentive offerings and, Kelvin, to where you're going, yes, we want to be more in the real estate space. We do have some real estate that we are locked into. We're looking at a pretty major acquisition where we'll have a little bit more flexibility, but where there are, starting to scale manufacturing needs, absolutely. That's when we want to be able to be part of that conversation. Because we feel like we're a great place to do it. And, it's 20 minutes on a bad day. We think you could probably do it in 15 on most days. You have some manufacturing areas in between for sure. And at the same time, our pitch is, look, bring manufacturing space to the state, but also realize, within the office construct, bring some office jobs to the state of Utah as well. We've seen a number of companies, I won't say which ones, but we've seen a lot of life science companies that have that really strong manufacturing and office presence here in the state.
And we will have vertiports, right? I mean, that's in the plan. So you could also even fly there in even shorter than 15 minutes, I think, is the goal, right?
That's
Mike,
the
did you have
goal.
something?
That's the goal. Yeah.
Yeah. I know we're just about out of time. Any other questions? Anything you wanted to hit on before we wrapped up? Yeah.
Jefferson, without getting too down in the weeds, please help me understand how tracks and front runner connect.
That's a great question for our two directors here.
Okay. Front runner has a station right to the west of the point. Literally on the UP&L track line that it's currently on. So there will be a new stop there. That's been funded. I don't know if it's been, I think it's in environmental study right now. They're also doing some double tracking through that area as well for efficiency. Our current plan is from that front runner station to run light rail through our site and up and over I-15 into Draper that will then connect into Lehigh. So that is on a plan. That's a future plan. I don't know which would come first, whether the red line would continue on, meet up with kind of Bangor, and then come onto our site, or whether we would build light rail on our site first, and then the red line would connect to ours. I don't know the timing of that.
Any thoughts, Ben, on your side?
Well, mass transportation is absolutely critical. This is fresh on my mind. I teach a class at the University of Utah. We talked all about transportation, and it really is the lifeblood of our economy. Behind workforce, I don't think there's anything more important than transportation, so we've got to get it right. We feel like connectivity through light rail would be awesome. We are not on any plans, but we are a little bit different in the sense that we do have good revenue sources where we can help to fund some of those things. Obviously, a front runner would be a little bit more difficult than that, given its geographic location, but mass transportation for us is going to be absolutely critical. So we've had some initial conversations with UTA. There is some service that's already kind of planned out for the northwest quadrant of Salt Lake City, but we move goods. That's our primary target. We've had businesses that have said, look, it's more important for you to move people in and out of here than necessarily goods, so it's something that we're taking a dual approach with.
And with that, Kelvin, I think we're wrapped up. And I just want to especially thank this group because I know how hard they work. And Jerry made this comment, but they are working very hard on behalf of the state to try to provide this world-class ecosystem for all of these wonderful companies here in Utah. So, turn it back to you, Kelvin.
Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause.